Thank you. All right, I've got one topic that's somewhat lengthy, so glad we've got a decent amount of time. Let me do this. Okay, there we go. And zoom in a little bit. So I shared this in Istio steering a little bit ago and wanted to bring this to TOC and the community. High level overview here. But over the past few years, Istio project has grown a lot. We've got a lot of different things that we're working on, and it's not showing the right stock. There we go. Yeah, the community has grown a lot, and it's changed a lot, especially since coming to the CNCF, and this has been really great for a lot of our users and for the community in general. However, we've also been seeing, for lack of a better term, a lot of maintainer churn as folks have been moving to other projects or just not as active. I've had a couple of longtime members retire in the past, so we often find ourselves in several areas with understaffing, and so this doc contains several suggestions, proposals, I'll say, about how to try to address some of these things and really try to create a pipeline of future leaders in the project in a very proactive way. Going through the different proposals in order, bringing this new idea to the project of something like an area lead or a champion. I'll go into more detail later. The second priority is on documentation, making it a sort of own responsibility for the maintainers and aforementioned area leads. Establishing an AI contribution policy, refreshing maintainer and emeritus status, so going through our, pruning our list of maintainers and for folks who aren't as active anymore. Some targeted advancement for underserved areas, focused reduction of knowledge silos in critical areas, refreshing the working group structure, and then an optional thing about reestablishing a triagers group. So at a high level, those are sort of some of the suggestions. I came up with each of these, but then had AI help me flesh out some of the details and some of the language here. Then I went back and added some changes and even some more details in the proposals. Before digging into any of the particular proposals here, does anybody have any questions or comments about the direction of what's being addressed here? I'll take that as a no. Okay, I'll jump into some of the proposals then, and I'll start with this top one because it's probably the most confusing / controversial. Right now, TOC acts sort of as a, I have a better term, a bottleneck on a lot of the more technical, detailed changes that happen to the project. There's a lot of institutional knowledge that is sort of concentrated within a handful of people. As I understand it, that's how Istio has tended to work historically, but I think that that's not necessarily going to scale well as we see more contributors trying to contribute to the project as we try to extend Istio into new areas like AI. And so I'm wanting to create this idea of area leads. This is not necessarily the idea, Mitch has a question further down. This is not necessarily the working group leads role that we've had in the past. I'm not suggesting that we formally bring those back or that we go back to having multiple working group meetings and things like that. But basically, I'm wanting to create sort of this sub rung on the contributor ladder for specific areas that TOC deems fit that don't necessarily need to correspond to a working group or a group of maintainers. One poor example here that in some of the sort of sample roles that I brought up here is sort of sidecar and ambient. Well, sidecar and Envoy feature integration, and then ambient. Right now, those are both sort of within the networking or pilot working group, but I think it makes a lot of sense to try to have some leadership and and road mapping distinct between the two. Maybe have some one lead focused on how do we evolve sidecar, how do we improve sidecar, how do we take advantage of certain new Envoy features. For example, sidecar still doesn't support, to my knowledge, filter chain matcher, and we use that extensively in ambient and waypointing. And I don't think we use, maybe we use it in gateways, but I don't think sidecars do. So like this, an area lead would be, that would be something on the area lead's radar to try to come up with a path to be able to get there so that we can, do more complex things or improve the interoperability, for example, between sidecar and ambient. So these don't need to be tied to area leads. They can also be temporary for a particular purpose. So the thing that comes to mind here as is the infrastructure migration. I think it makes a lot of sense to be able to have TOC appoint an area lead to go and lead that migration effort, give that person or persons access to things for a time. And then once that migration effort is done and the knowledge has been shared out, we can send it back down. The goal here is, I'm one of the pieces of feedback steering gave about having this idea. It's changed since I brought it to steering, but one of the big questions or concerns about this is, well, this is a lot of time, right? In a project where we already have sort of this understaffing issue, asking people to do more is not necessarily going to be it's going to be a tough sell. And this proposal is trying to acknowledge that. And I think generally what I would like to be able to see here, and it's I think woven into some other proposals, is sort of this mentorship or enablement going from TOC to area leads, to raise up area leads, and then area leads to help maintainers get to area leads, and then having maintainers help contributors get to maintainer, and try to really create this sort of, again, foundation for the next generation of Istio contributors and maintainers that we see in some other projects like Kubernetes. So I put a smattering of different examples here, not necessarily married to any of them, but one to just help people sort of see what this could look like. Taking a pause there, I'm not going to go in this much detail for all of them, but want to see if folks have thoughts or opinions on this first proposal.
Yeah, I just like, why? What's the benefit of doing this rather than just saying we now have, for each group we're going to make, that's now a working group, and we just reshape the working groups and we keep the existing structure?
I don't necessarily have an issue with that. Every time I've brought up bringing up like reinstating working group leads, there's always been this sort of hesitation, specifically around, I think, the meetings and the time spent. My somewhat naive hope was by calling a different name, we could maybe talk about the merits of the proposal without recalling past pain or past impressions or things like that. But if we think that the best way of doing this is just to have each existing group have one or more leads that might even sub-specialize into different areas, so maybe there are 2 or 3, or however many networking working group leads, and one's a sidecar person or whatever, like, I'm totally fine with that. The different name is literally just a way to try to think about the idea divorced of previous context.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I'm not 100% opposed to it. Just, it seems like for like more bureaucracy, not bureaucracy, but just more like social constructs in an area where we don't have so many people that we need so many concepts, if that makes sense. But I'm not so opposed to it. Other people like it.
Yeah, and I'm also not saying. Oh, go ahead, Louis. You go first.
Yeah, I guess that's the question, right? Like, like obviously, like I generally agree with the defined areas of focus, or at least that it's a reasonable candidate set. Is do we have the people?
I think that I want to try to approach this somewhat delicately. I think that if we don't try to do good things that we know that we want to do because we don't have the people today, we're never going to get the people.
Yeah, I agree. There could be a chicken and egg problem for sure.
My hope, again, potentially naively, my hope is that by creating these additional rungs in the ladder and creating the bureaucracy, potential contributors can see themselves in that role one day. I think for for people who are maintainers or who potentially want to become maintainers, the bar is the current state of the bar is really high, 30 PRs, and then you've got to get what the remnants of working group leads to sort of align, really community leaders to align with you becoming a maintainer, and then the next step is sort of TOC if you want more recognition, and that's just not. I don't think it's really encouraging to people. It's not encouraging, especially to end user companies who need to make a case to their employer why they should be spending business time investing in the project. I want to. I think what I've seen in other projects is that that sell is easier when you're able to show a progression of influence in a time frame that seems reasonable and that can create impact in the company. Some of these proposals, the goal of a lot of these proposals is to make it less, is to reduce the barrier to entry to make meaningful contributions and to get recognized for being a contributor to the Istio project, while at the same time trying not to overly burden existing maintainers. I also suspect that there are people who are already serving in this role. Some of them are already part of TOC. Some of them are just, like I said, community leaders. And I think by adding some formality to the roles, it helps open up things like mentorship, where someone says, hey, I want to become a working group lead or area lead or whatever else. Can you help with me? And if the people already serving in that role have time, that they can do that. But that conversation never happens today, partly, I think, because we don't sort of have that expectation or that the wording for it in the project.
Rama, as somebody who works for an end user company, right? Do you have an opinion about that part of it, right? Like, what kind of recognition do you get within Salesforce if there was a ladder within Istio that was more than 2 rungs? Would it have been beneficial to you? Like, what's your take on this?
I think it would be beneficial for sure, but I would say being maintainer itself is a recognition by itself, basically, right? That going beyond that, people don't care much, but being a maintainer itself is a recognition, and you get recognized in the company.
Yeah, that's kind of aligns with how I have heard other companies talk about this, right? Like the difference between maintainer and TOC, right, inside some potential customers probably meaningless. But between nothing and a maintainer is definitely meaningful, because that way I know I can get my bugs fixed, right, as an end user, right? So there's real material value in that run. And, corporations being what they are, it's hard to expect more of them, right? And from a kind of moral investment standpoint. So I totally get why that's the general attitude. And maybe the nomenclature here may be better aligned to just kind of extend on the maintainer theme, right? Rather than lead or some other like senior maintainer, or right, which with an area of focus, right, might actually have more resonance with corporate land than area lead or working group lead or any of those other things, which also come with the overtones of, oh, there are additional organizational work in the community that maybe I don't like to pay for. There's the optics side on in user land that we should be very cognizant of. I think we have to be very cognizant of.
Yeah,
Right.
that's a great call out. I like that. I like that idea a lot, actually.
Even Envoy does this similar thing. Basically, they have maintainer, senior maintainer.
Right, and I think senior maintainer kind of aligns with like owning some specific areas and maybe a bit more autonomy about driving roadmap, which some companies may find value in.
Yeah, I agree.
And possibly a less like the nomenclature applies less distinction between the roles, which is probably also beneficial. And then maybe, you know, we can talk about lowering the bar for maintainer versus senior maintainer.
Right.
Right. That's part of that. But there's more continuity there.
Yeah, that's really great feedback. I'll add that as well. We already do this to some extent. I didn't mean to admit that. We do this to some extent with like networking maintainer and then like pilot maintainer, where pilot is a subset of networking maintainers for really complex areas. And so I think that that's worked fairly well. And so we've got some prior art for something like that.
To answer your question, Ian, no, I don't think there has to be exclusivity. Right, you can have more than one senior maintainer have responsibility for an area. I think it just implies a little bit more discretion, right, on their part to make decisions in the absence of other people being able to provide feedback. Right, it's like we trust the senior maintainers to make good decisions. So, you know, if for some reason the other senior maintainer is not around, that's okay, right? Like they'll approve a PR, right, and the other senior maintainer just assumes that they've made a good choice, and they can always go talk about it later.
And in the absence of like, not the absence, but if there is for some reason a large delay in TOC quorum to be able to make a decision that's time sensitive, I think senior maintainers, the group of senior maintainers are a great, provide great additional context to help make decisions there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can view the TOC as a bunch of senior maintainers who agree to get together on a regular basis and perform some other kind of organizational tasks. But you know, they're not the only people who can make technical judgments about the project.
That's fantastic feedback. Really appreciate that, and I like where this is headed. I'll workshop this a little bit more and bring it back. Don't want to focus just on this one, but love to move forward. This next one's on docs, and this is one that Daniel Houghton spoke about in last week's community meeting and gave us some good feedback. I think that you know, in times past, Istio used to have sort of a group of people who were sort of dedicated docs people, not necessarily paid for to do that by their company, but sorry, got distracted. I haven't figured out how to turn off notifications on this computer yet, so they keep popping up. Yeah, in times past, yet like sort of dedicated docs maintainers, and that I think we just don't have that anymore. Daniel has been admirably and selflessly sort of holding down that fort the last little bit of time, almost on his own, and I don't think that I mean that's a recipe for burnout. And so he talks about some of the pain points there around grammar and spell checking, and just making sure release notes match, those sorts of things. So what I'm recommending here is to, for lack of a better term, try to shift left a little bit of the doc responsibilities and decentralize, that's a better term, decentralize a bit of the doc responsibility to maintainers, and try to create a bit of an expectation that a feature is not complete a user-facing feature or change is not complete until there are docs for it. That does raise the bar and the complexity of any individual change. But I think something like that is necessary to actually get us to a point where we can improve our docs and to make sure we keep our docs up to date without a vendor hiring a full-time docs person and putting them on the Istio project. Additionally, I'm also proposing that we immediately identify 2 to 3 additional contributors to assist with docs PRs. That was one of the things that the biggest thing Daniel asked for was just more eyes and more hands to help get through the backlog and to review things. Maybe even we do some docs triage at the beginning of community meetings. Just, again, not necessarily married to any of the particulars of the ideas, but want to do something to try to address the sort of immediate concerns.
Yeah. I did want to raise one thing here, and I think this is a systemic problem in open source, right, for lots and lots of projects, right? I think we should think long and hard about the role of AI here. John, right, Denis and co did some interesting stuff for the agent gateway docs using AI as almost trying to make chat the primary interface point for the documentation.
You mean the ask AI function, Louis?
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's 2 sides to this, right? One, there's obviously like consumption through AI, right, and indexing and all that kind of stuff, which is right becoming fairly standard nowadays. But also the maintenance side, right? Like spelling and grammar checks are things AI can do really, really well. The AI can help the average maintainer who maybe is not a documentation expert, but who does understand the features and how they work, produce a decent product. And so maybe our focus should be on creating an enabling pipeline that facilitates this and lowers the burden massively on doc maintainers, possibly to the point even of not requiring them to review, but only the maintainers reviewing the kind of technical basic details, and the doc getting written by basically talking to a bot, right? And say, look, here's the design doc. Okay, it's given a bunch of prompts about how to generate the doc. That goes through a round of reviews. It's integrated with the CI/CD pipeline for the docs and everything. I suspect, like from an investment and long-term trajectory standpoint, that's how we will have to run, and how the rest of the open source ecosystem will have to run, like not just us, in reality. And I think we're already seeing that trend in the industry. And so, like, right, part of that, I think maybe that should be our focus, at least as a sprint, to see if we can get, like, just lower that barrier so much, right, that it naturally becomes a maintainer thing, right, effectively. The maintainers do write the docs, but they write them, the barrier to writing a doc is just massively lowered.
I'm 100% aligned with that. The reason I didn't take that lens is because AI in AI usage, especially open source, is somewhat controversial. And one of the actual, it's full of nonsense to priority number 3, actually. One of the things, the piece of feedback that Daniel gave in the past when trying to use AI is that it was, oftentimes what it produced was required more review, and it would have been faster to just use the
well, I think that's the non-experts using AI to produce something is very different than experts using the AI to produce something.
I 100% agree, and I also want to say that it's different when when we're just sort of, I don't know what you did specifically, Daniel, but I think models have improved. I've seen this in other projects that I maintain, but also the ability to create guardrails and hydrate AI with context. There are so many more tools to do that well. There are features in GitHub like agentic workflows that will give you some autonomy to sort of automatically enable AI things. We could do something similar with Prowl since we're close to GitHub Actions. I think it's worth taking a look at to do exactly what you're describing. I just don't know what our comfort level is. So I think to make sure that as a community we're comfortable with what we end up with, having a policy to distinguish between basically good AI versus bad AI from the lens of Istio maintainers will be really helpful to help, well, us know what we're comfortable with, and also help new contributors know that there's a difference in trust when it comes to AI being used by maintainers and trusted entities versus folks new to the project.
Right.
I think it's fine to use AI to kind of like refresh your words, but I think people would hate if our doc was written by AI, which I don't think, Louis, that's what you're proposing, right? So what we want is developers still take time to write the docs in AI, write the docs manually, hopefully, and then use AI to refine and put the guardrail, using the AI to do spell checking to make it look nicer. And maybe the AI can approve it too.
So I think it's more than just syntactic though, Lynn, right? So like there's the basic like grammar and spell check. Yeah, fine. But what I found, because I've been testing some of this stuff for some internal documentation efforts, you have the core set of technical information. You have the knowledge, right? The maintainer has the knowledge, right? If you give the AI the knowledge, right, it can do a good job putting it into descriptive text, right? And then what you do is you use the AI to iterate, right? Just like you would manually iterate on any documentation. The AI is just like a co-pilot, to coin a phrase. But you can assign the AI to do specific kinds of tasks that if it has a decent base of knowledge, it can actually really help with the documentation. Like it can help with like linking context and topics, right? That otherwise you'd have to kind of go and scrape the docs and figure out where all the links are and then hyperlink them all yourself, right? Do that. And so there's a bunch of these kinds of not semantic tasks in a way that are not just purely syntactic. Now, like this is all obviously going to be crawl, walk, run, right? We're not going to be able to like go to a full AI process off the bat. But I guess there's a few things to look into. One, are there good exemplars now out there that we could like say, this is where we want to be, right? So like we have like an end state goal, right? If we were to define the ideal documentation workflow, what is the lowest friction, most useful, highest quality output we can get, and how would AI help us to do that? And then, okay, what are the steps along that path? Like that's the kind of thing that I would like us to spend a little time on. And yeah, like, and all with the goal of pushing the knowledge part back into the maintainers. Right, there's a whole bunch of quality tasks the AI can handle, right? Like load up all the Istio docs and tell me all the broken references, right? Tell me all the semantic inconsistencies, right, in the docs, right, where one doc says a different thing to the other doc, right? You can ask the AI a whole bunch of these kind of quality-related, non-syntactic tasks. Yeah, you still have curation, right? I think we're never saying we're moving away from curation, right? Like the doc doesn't get checked in until at least somebody has read it, right? Or maybe we get to the point where, say, a human was involved enough in this task that it's okay for the AI to check it in, right? We just need some reasonable measure of some maintainer involvement in it, not necessarily that they read every word in the final output. Right? That might actually be a better metric. I just don't think we've ever defined a process metric like that. It was like, what's the aggregate human involvement in the workflow versus, I click approve right at the end. Right? Obviously, we're not going to move away from clicking approve at the end immediately, but it may not have to be at the end. It could be logically in the middle, right? And that might actually be fine.
I think crawl, walk, run is a great formulation for that, because again, it's really hard to think about that, that really far down reality. In the short term, I think that there are definitely some things we can do to improve the burnout scenario that we're facing right now, and to also, again, improve the quality of our docs. had AI generate a roadmap of docs improvements and gaps based on the Istio repo and what we have in the docs. For example, like all the different environment variables that we have that you can put into Istio, can we group that in some sane way, in a saner way than we currently, like a lot of different questions you can start asking about how to make this more digestible. And so I'm in favor of that direction. Just want to make sure that we're comfortable and we have some guardrails for what we feel is too much AI, what we feel is not good use of AI, et cetera, before we go down that journey.
Yeah, so this is AI for maintainers by maintainers, right? Like that's clearly we're going to start there no matter what, right? For any use case of AI that's systematic within the project, right? Then maybe AI for contributors, and then so on and so forth. But this is a good place. Like documentation is the place where AI provides the most leverage.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so we've got 18 minutes left. Let me quickly check to see if there are other topics that were added. Does not look like there was.
Yeah, there wasn't. So for this doc, I just want to wrap up, make sure we have are in agreement, because we talk a lot about AI, but even if we're using AI, somebody has to look into how to enhance our pipeline to do that. And I'm not sure if anybody have the bandwidth. We'll continue keep our doc running. So if I understood correctly, right now we agree we should delegate more work on the docs to developers who develop in the feature, owning the area, and I assume they could be reviewers too, right? So let's say if somebody develop a particular feature, multi-cluster ambient, and submit PR, maybe another developer on that area can be the reviewer, so it doesn't have to fall down to Daniel as a single reviewer. So I think that covers pretty well. But I think the other area that's also outstanding regarding doc, and Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong, is the infrastructure. Like the pipeline is keep it healthy and up running. Is there any concern on that area that we could potentially we need to worry about?
The pipeline is pretty infrequent. It more depends if somebody in Istio changes, Istio cuddles output, or the name of some object that's created. If that changes, it breaks tests, and that's the part of infra that breaks is the test no longer passing.
Yeah, that's, and correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, is a big part of that the fact that we do branch cut for docs like right during toward the end of the release process. So like what's the signal for if something on master is breaking the next release's docs?
Each Sunday night, there's a automator process that runs that bumps the commit on master to the commit on master of Istio, and that failing or when that fails its test is the indicator that something's wrong. But because it's automator cutting the PR, that requires somebody to actively go look for that PR and then address it.
Gotcha. Okay, so there's just not a fix, like it's the absence of there's an absence of a PR versus something that is an error being surfaced somewhere essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Okay.
Who do we delegate that work to? The release manager? I'm just thinking loud here. So it's the work is more distributed versus just having Daniel always look every week to see if there's anything broke and troubleshooting and identify the right developers.
The problem with that, there's no release manager for the master branches. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Keith.
No, go ahead. I was going to say the same thing. And I think that the proper place is probably not the release manager, but it's the person who makes the change. At least from my perspective, the issue here is distributed signal. We have to look in multiple places to be able to see where the change happened, or like where the break happened. And so I think in an ideal world, if we just sort of forgot costs for a second, ideally we have some sort of integration where when that automator like job breaks and doesn't happen, we find the most recent person who created a PR, and ping or find that last X number of people, humans who created PRs, and ping them in Slack.
I think that's so challenging. How do you identify who is the person, which change to break that, right? Because if I can identify this developer out of the 10 changes causing this, then that work is done. I think the hard thing is, how do we identify? Because Daniel, if I'm understanding correctly, it's like every single change for that entire week, and then you get a build report. So I assume there's probably 40, 50 changes merged.
Yeah, and then half the time when one fails, you don't necessarily know all the failures that might follow it. So, and it's a very manual process. Like if output changed, I can go find through get blame, but that doesn't always tell me who changed it if it's a more complex issue rather than just a identified on one single line issue.
Yeah, so I know release manager doesn't do master, but can we expand it, be given the master is going to be fit to the release branch in a month or two?
I personally, as someone who did release manager, I don't think it's fair to delegate that to the release managers because they don't really have a say what's going into master.
Right.
Yeah, but
And half
okay,
the time they don't know what's going in.
Who would you propose to delegate this? And ideally, you want to distribute the work and not just delegate to one single person, right? Which is you right now, which is so unfair.
In an ideal world, it should be the person that's putting in the change.
Right. And so that's why my again, going to that perfect world and then figuring out how to get there. If we can't figure out who made the specific change, can we figure out, okay, who changed master recently, right? Take a random sampling of human committers and say, out of you five, somebody needs to figure out what happened here. And, we create an issue, we assign the issue, and again, there's a core set of maintainers meets weekly. That can be a thing that we sort of check in to find an owner for. And yeah, I mean, I think part of the reason why that might feel scary to some people, or feel like a lot more extra work to some people, is because going back to first priority and then one of the later priorities is we do have relatively a few people right now, but I think that the goal is to get to a place where we have more maintainers, we've got more contributors, and this is a place where somebody can come in and really contribute and help the project. And I think the burden gets lighter over time as we invest in the people side of the project.
Maybe one thing I could think of is if that build failed for that week, maybe if we couldn't figure out, we can tag the people who make the changes, which is a bunch of people. And if we can't figure out, that would be the topic on the Wednesday, and to figure out who should be that person to take it forward before we discuss any other topic, because I can see that should be the most important topic. Else it could be another week. It would be harder for the project to identify the problems.
I 100% agree. I think that's a great idea. If we're going to send the message, speaking to my fellow TOC people here on this, if we're going to send the message that docs are first class responsibility of the people who commit code to the project, the way that we do that is we block other work on making sure that docs get taken care of. If you've got to send that signal. So yeah, blocking the rest of the discussion on the Wednesday meeting on fighting somebody who's going to own that week, figuring out what's breaking, makes a ton of sense to me.
Okay, so I think, Daniel, maybe that would help you at least offload that portion of work. And then we also talk about conjunction with, I think Keith made an interesting comment, maybe having the Istio maintainers for a particular area. They also own the doc maintainers for those particular areas. So that immediately expand over potential reviewer for the doc, along with AI to help guardrail. I think that will be sufficient.
Yeah, that's the hope, at least.
All right, cool. Should we move to the AI contribution policy?
Yes. This one, Vasila shared Kyverno's policy as a good starting point. I think that we've talked about doing this for a while, just haven't done it. By the way, I'm probably gonna regret this, but I'm also somewhat volunteering myself to actually go and make PR to do some of these things. This year, I was gonna do this last year, but didn't have time. This year, I really want to make community experience within my focuses on TOC. So I have no problem going and actually writing the policies and taking some of this work. Would love to have other folks who are passionate about this stuff join me. But I sort of see myself implicitly as being the action item owner for most of these. But I like the Kyverno policy. It's got a lot of, I think directionally and messaging wise, it strikes a good balance. AI welcome, humans responsible. Love that. Kyverno maintainers are responsible from some of the rules and can use AI tools at their discretion as they've proven themselves. I think that's another interesting thing we can discuss and debate if we want to do that here. Content on blogs versus separate from code changes, licensing things. I think there's a lot of great stuff here, and happy to create a draft for further discussion. Actually, I wrote that and share the tab. This is the Kyverno policy. If you can generally see the general guidelines here of how contributors should use it, maintainers being exempt, separate guidelines for websites and blogs, licensing and legal things, evaluations, etc., and references, like they reference the CNCF legal policy, Ghosty, Cooper, like other blogs and things like that. So I am happy to sort of take a stab at creating a draft for this, or work with other folks to create a draft sort of inspired by the Kyverno policy and other policies, and have something more concrete to review. The priority here is mainly just to say that, hey, you should create a policy and actually do this.
Yeah. Yeah, I just read the Kyverno one. It actually looks pretty good. So I'm generally in favor of something like that.
Yeah, I agree. They put a lot of thoughts into it for sure.
Yeah, the max 8 open PRs in particular.
Oh, I didn't see that part. That's yeah, contributors.
Mm-hmm.
I think GitHub might have added
and
native support for that or something. I recall something around those lines. Maybe not.
Yeah. And then also only for open issues.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there are these kind of bandwidth limiting things. Plus the attribution, right? Like,
yes.
You gotta tell us you used AI for this. We'll probably know anyway, but it would be better if we could automate the knowing rather than having the human have to enforce it.
Yeah, for sure.
It does say should instead of must, but they probably meant must.
Probably. I think it's also one of the other relevant things here as far as it's only accepted issues. So like it's not just, this basically means you can't open an issue and then create a PR for that issue in sort of one fell swoop under this policy for using AI at least. You don't currently. Go ahead.
Yeah, just like reasonable guarantees that some amount of human effort has been put into this and it's not fully automated end to end. Yes.
I think one of the interesting things for us as a project is that we don't currently do a great job of accepting issues versus not. That could be something we could return to doing, or we could just change it part of the policy. But I do like the idea of having a human verify it and validate we want this change before AI is being used. John, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if this is actionable, but just want to give my experience lately with the problematic AI contributions. It's largely that it lowers the barrier to entry, which sounds like a good idea and often is, but it can be a bad thing when someone would previously open a bug and say, hey, in this tricky core part of the project, we have this tricky issue. And now they open a PR and it doesn't know all the tricky details of the project, obviously, and so it does it entirely the wrong way, and you get in a sticky position because I don't know if this person spent 10 seconds on this or 10 hours. It's all wrong. It would take me hours to fix it myself or hours to fix their PR. And it's just kind of a really awkward position because I don't want to just say like, look, this is a valid issue you're fixing, but you're doing it all wrong, close. But I also don't want to spend hours fixing it myself, and I don't want to spend hours guiding them to fix it and kind of like becoming their prompt engine via GitHub comments, essentially. That's where I've struggled the most. If it's obvious vibe slop, it's like more clear. It's just like, we're not going to do this. And having a policy is very useful there to just have something to make it so you're not to blame, the policy's to blame. But it's like those middle ground ones that are the hardest for sure. Especially what we'll probably find as well is that you'll start getting this not from untrusted people, but from contributors that you do trust and that do, in other situations, make good changes. And now are extending beyond their current capabilities. And then it's really tricky because like, if some drive-by slop is opened, sure, you feel fine closing it. But if I put a slop PR, would you close it? You know?
Yeah.
Now, hopefully, I mean, you know what I mean. So that's my experience. I don't know a solution for that, but just something I've been experiencing a bit on some other projects.
I think that the nuance there is that not all slop is created equal. So to take that last example like you said, John, a slop PR from you is probably going to have better prompting, right? But there's a certain level of like, maybe this person's probably, when they're writing the problem for the AI to solve, they're probably caching some things. Maybe there's an assumption of more effort that doesn't always extend to everybody in some cases. Or you could literally just be, it could just be a pure slop and you didn't put any effort to it. But like the presumption might be, is likely for someone who has done work elsewhere, if they know that area, that they put some degree of thought that this should look a certain way, right? So it is pretty complex. I think that's where design docs have tended to help in the past. Because like even before AI, we saw some of this, right? People want to come in and solve, not to pick anybody in particular, but like service entry merging for the 20th time. There've been a bunch of regressions there. Even before AI, people were trying to take a step at solving that. And it's, yeah, the conversation's like, yeah, I get it. It's a valid issue. It's really hard. And so a design doc shows how you're going to solve the edge cases helps. One thing that I've seen on some other newer projects is we have like a PR template where if you use AI, you have to put the prompt that you use to prompt the AI. Or you even have, if the AI opens the PR, it will look at that file and it will report the prompt that was used. That could also help potentially with showing the degree of effort and care that was used. So don't claim to have the answers, but just interesting things that we could do.
So, I mean, obviously there's the kind of the adversarial AI stuff, right, in this domain. It's like the contributors have their AI, we have our AI, right? And we set them to battle, right, to establish quality boundaries. Obviously there's a fair amount of complexity in putting up that kind of defense system, for better or for worse. One of the things I'm hoping to see the CNCF do is help projects with this, right? A bit like the AI docs problem, actually, right? Okay, if we're going to be in this world, right, and as John rightly points out, the middle ground one is the worst or the hardest to make decisions about, right? It's like, okay, some effort went into it. It's 80% slop, 20% thought, as opposed to 90%. Like I opened the issue and I said, hey, Claude, fix the issue for me. And I just sent the PR, right? Like, screw that. But where do we look for signals of quality? Like, how do we assess signals of quality? And does this become a human reputation thing over time? Right, which is the same thing as becoming a maintainer. At least with this policy, having some form of disclosure helps we at least think about reputation. But it may be, right, we get a complete drive by a human being who actually puts a crap load of time and effort into it, and builds reputation over time. Right, and does so very quickly, like the guy doing all the work on compression, right, for Prometheus metrics, right? Never seen him before until a recent working group meetings, and clearly very competent, putting time and effort in, doing useful things. But there are other signals of reputation there, right? And that may ultimately where we end up, right, is a human reputation system, right, where the maintainers can start blessing people effectively and say, yeah, okay, if you see something from them, you're going to give it more time and effort, and we can automate that into the process. That might be, we become a social network for code.
Mitchell Hashimoto has created this whole vouch thing that does pretty much that for the purpose of automating it. And Kyverno's policy is inspired by some of the aspects of Ghosty, which uses that system. A lot of work we can do here to make things simpler. We are at time. Just quickly want to remind folks that there are, that closed the sharing, interesting. Just want to remind folks that there are some other proposals here in the doc. Would love to hear more from folks. If we've got time on Wednesday, I'll put this in as like the last topic. If you want to come back around to some of these. In particular, the targeted maintainer advancement for underserved areas talks a little bit about that lowering the barrier for maintainership in some ways. And that might be interesting to discuss. So feel free to comment async. We appreciate folks taking an hour to talk through some of these proposals, and I'll start iterating on them as I get time.
All right, appreciate it, Keith.
Should we cancel the meeting in 2 weeks?
Yeah, there's that problem.
Is that KubeCon?
Yeah,
that is
it's
KubeCon.
the Colo day.
Okay, yeah, for sure.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
folks.